A key theme. 1. Dilemma of revenge and forgiveness. Shows how Jean Valjean's life changes as he obsesses over revenge. Explore the meaning of forgiveness and salvation through the pleasure of revenge and the resulting emptiness. 2. Social absurdity and personal struggle. Jean Valjean's revenge goes beyond mere personal resentment, and is a resistance to the social fabric and unfair treatment that suppressed him. This sheds light on how individuals can act against social injustice. 3. Boundaries between good and evil. Through the process of Jean Valjean gradually becoming like the people he hated through revenge, he explores the boundaries of good and evil within humans. The main characters. 1. Jean Valjean. The protagonist determined to take revenge. He goes through inner conflicts and changes along the way of revenge. 2. Bishops. A person who tried to save Jean Valjean but gets a backlash from him. At the center of a case that is the beginning of Jean Valjean's revenge. 3. Jabeur. Inspector who tracks Jean Valjean endlessly. Believes in the absoluteness of law and order, and his beliefs are challenged through confrontation with Jean Valjean. 4. Fantin. Unlike in the original, Jean Valjean's revenge scheme is involved in testing his humanity. 5. Cosette. Used as a tool for Jean Valjean's revenge, but her innocence plays a role in shaking Jean Valjean's heart. 6. Marius. A young idealist involved in the revolution, with pure enthusiasm in contrast to Jean Valjean's vengeance. Plot composition. Part 1. Vengeful Jean Valjean. Confusion and anger after release. Jean Valjean, who takes society's exclusion and Bishop's kindness as hypocrisy, and grows vengeful. Pledge of revenge. Determination to avenge those who inflicted his pain. Part 2. New identity. Preparation for revenge. New name and status. Using pseudonyms to gain wealth and power. Ready for revenge on society. Confrontation with Jabeur. Psychological revenge drama unfolds with plans to trap Jabeur. Part 3. Fantin and Cosette. The multiple crossroads. Meeting with Fantin and Cosette. Trying to use Cosette as a tool for revenge, but conflicting with her innocence. Trade with Thénardier. A plot to get Cosette into his own hands. Part 4. Marius and the Revolution. The boundary between revenge and redemption. Conflict with Marius. Jean Valjean. Influenced by his revolutionary spirit. Choice in the revolution. Conflict over whether to save Marius or leave him as part of revenge. Part 5. The last showdown with Jabeur. Downfall of Jabeur. Trapped Jabeur's beliefs crumble. Jean Valjean is on the verge of completing revenge, but loses the meaning of revenge due to Jabeur's destruction. Part 6. The last of Jean Valjean. End of revenge and solitude. Deteriorating relationship with Cosette. Realizing the emptiness caused by revenge. Tragic ending. Losing everything and dying alone. Realizing the tragedy brought by vengeance. Theme and message. Vengeance trap. Through the temporary satisfaction that revenge brings and the eternal emptiness that results, it conveys the message that true salvation comes from forgiveness and love, not revenge. Social justice and individual choices. Paint an individual's struggle against the injustices of society, reflecting on how to implement justice and its consequences. An ending idea. Jean Valjean is almost done with his revenge plan, but he realizes that love and forgiveness, not revenge, bring true salvation. He leaves Cosette and Marius free, ending the rest of his life in solitude. Jean Valjean's tragic ending emphasizes the destructive power of revenge. leaving readers with a deep lingering feeling and reflection. Part 1. Vengeful Jean Valjean. Jean Valjean's inner feelings were shaken by the confusion and anger after his release. He came out into the world with the scars and distrust that 19 years in prison left him. Complex emotions were intertwined in his mind. Society still branded him a criminal, and no one welcomed him warmly. But the bishop's kindness confused him. Jean Valjean considered this hypocrisy. Although the bishop advised him to start his life anew by giving him 2 silver candles, he thought the bishop's kindness drove him to deeper despair. Jean Valjean stole silverware from the bishop's house on the first night out of prison. But the bishop saved him from the police. The bishop said, "Brother, you are no longer a servant of evil. You are a servant of good." The case left a deep impression on Jean Valjean's mind, but he regarded it as a moment of his weakness rather than a sign of good. With the flames of revenge in his heart, he decided to pay back to all who caused him pain. His revenge went beyond mere personal resentment. He planned revenge out of resistance to the social structure and unfair treatment that suppressed him. Jean Valjean pledged to take revenge on those who inflicted his suffering. This was the first action he chose independently. Through revenge, he sought to prove his existence and show his defiance of society. Jean Valjean decided to have a new identity. He got a new name and position, and began preparing for revenge. He used a pseudonym to obtain wealth and power. His goal was to go beyond just revenge, and to complete revenge against the social system that suppressed him. Through this, he sought to restore his lost self-esteem and humanity. But Jean Valjean's vengeance was gradually turning him into a monster. He didn't realize that he was becoming like the people he hated. Inside the boundary between good and evil was breaking down. The pleasure of revenge briefly satisfied him, but the emptiness after that drove him deeper into despair. Revenge was completely transforming his life. Jean Valjean's revenge plan shook his life to the fullest. He was drunk on the sweetness of revenge, but the consequences covered him in a larger shadow. His vindictiveness was making him an increasingly lonely being. Vindictiveness gave him instant gratification, but left an eternal void. Jean Valjean had to realize that no matter how intense the pleasure gained through revenge was, it would never heal his wounds. Revenge was destroying his life, and he could not see what was waiting at the end of the road. He was walking into solitude with a vengeance. This was the biggest dilemma of his life. What will revenge leave him? Could it be true salvation? These questions continued to haunt him inside. The story of Jean Valjean's revenge reinterprets the original's deep moral reflection in a new direction. In the story, Jean Valjean is filled with revenge for personal pain and social absurdity, and his life gradually changes as he walks on the path of revenge. Part 2. New Identity. Preparation for revenge. Jean Valjean gains wealth and power by using a pseudonym to rebuild his life. He now transforms himself into a socially successful figure, not just an ex-convict. This process is a transformation of Jean Valjean's beginning of a new life with the name Madeleine. In the original, here, he becomes a successful factory owner, builds social status and reputation, and builds a foundation for revenge. However, this new life is just an open appearance, and his deep-seated vengeance is still burning. Jean Valjean gradually loses his humanity in the process of preparing for revenge, determining his determination to avenge those who caused him pain. This process shows the internal conflicts and psychological changes he goes through. The confrontation with Jabeur makes this story even more tense. As in the original, Jabeur believes in the absoluteness of law and order and constantly tracks Jean Valjean. However, in the story, Jean Valjean develops a psychological revenge play, planning to trap Jabeur. The confrontation with Jabeur goes beyond a simple fight between a law enforcement officer and a fugitive, and creates a scene in which each person's beliefs and values collide. Avoiding Jabeur's pursuit, Jean Valjean strengthens his new identity and carefully prepares a plan for revenge. He rises to a high social position to satisfy his vengeance, continuing to constantly resist Jabeur and other social structures that suppressed him. In this process, Jean Valjean realizes that his revenge is more than just a struggle for social injustice. However, he feels that he gradually resembles the people he hated in the process, and simultaneously experiences the pleasure of revenge and the resulting emptiness. This intensifies the dilemma between revenge and forgiveness within him. Jean Valjean's revenge appears as a form of resistance not only to those he holds grudges with, but also to the society as a whole surrounding him. This leads to his process of exploring the boundaries between justice and injustice through his personal struggle against social injustice. In this process, Jean Valjean gradually realizes that his revenge is not the real solution, and begins his journey to find true salvation through forgiveness and love. This new identity and the preparation of revenge sheds new light on the moral theme of the original, providing readers with deep reflection on the complex relationship between revenge and forgiveness. Jean Valjean's story eventually depicts a human journey to find a true path to salvation, beyond the destructive power of revenge. The third part of Jean Valjean's journey of revenge is the moment when the conflict between his humanity and revenge is maximized. In this part, the story revolves around Fantine and Cosette, and Jean Valjean tries to use them as tools for revenge, but their innocence shakes his heart. Part 3, Fantine and Cosette, the multiple crossroads. Jean Valjean tries to use Cosette as a means of revenge. Bringing her back from the Thénardiers is part of his plan. However, the innocence in Cosette's eyes, and the fact that she is not stained with the absurdity and malice of the world, shocks Jean Valjean. Her presence comes as a symbol of humanity and pure love that he has forgotten all along. Fantine is unexpectedly caught up in Jean Valjean's revenge plan. The story of Fantine, who suffers from social injustice and personal tragedy, makes a big difference in Jean Valjean's mind. Jean Valjean, who tried to take advantage of her pain, thinks again about the nature of revenge while witnessing her miserable fate firsthand. Fantine's pain becomes a process of realizing that it is not just because of the injustice of society, but also an aspect of the destruction brought about by revenge. Jean Valjean plots to get Cosette through a deal with Thénardier. In the process, he begins to realize how blind and inhumane his revenge is. The longer he spends with Cosette, the more her innocence and love break down Jean Valjean's psychological shield. He gradually feels that he wants to protect Cosette rather than revenge. At this point, Jean Valjean's inner conflict peaks. Everything he wanted to gain through revenge begins to seem pointless. He wonders if protecting Cosette and providing her with a better life is a real salvation. This conflict constantly asks him what choice he has between revenge and humanity. Jean Valjean's changes show how fluid the boundaries between good and evil are within humans. The process of regaining his humanity through Cosette, while on the path of revenge, is deeply touching. He is not just a revenge, but a human being who seeks to find true salvation through love and forgiveness. This section also asks philosophical questions about what the purpose and means of revenge are. Jean Valjean wants to make the world just through revenge, but eventually he realizes that it will only produce another form of absurdity and evil. Through Cosette, he learns that love and forgiveness, not revenge, are the forces that can change the world. This realization is the most important turning point in Jean Valjean's story. Part 3 is the part that reveals the most complex and human elements in Jean Valjean's journey of Revenge. Impressing readers deeply and reflecting through his inner changes and conflicts. It intensely shows the process of realizing that love and forgiveness, not revenge, is the way to true salvation, and makes readers explore the destructive power of revenge and the possibilities beyond. The fourth part of this work deals with how Jean Valjean's vengeance is tested and changed in the tumult of a revolution. Against the backdrop of a huge social change called revolution, Jean Valjean becomes at odds between his personal resentment and social justice. In this part, the character Marius symbolizes pure passion, which contrasts with Jean Valjean's vengeance. Part 4, Marius and the Revolution. The boundary between revenge and redemption. The beginning of the revolution and the conflict with Marius. Jean Valjean feels the atmosphere of revolution rising in downtown Paris. His anger at social absurdity builds understanding and empathy for the revolution. But his purpose is still focused on personal revenge. Marius, in contrast, participates in the revolution dreaming of a real change in society. Marius' passion serves as an opportunity for Jean Valjean to think about more than just revenge. Through his revolutionary speeches, Marius represents the voices of young people who confront social injustice. His speeches remind Jean Valjean of the need for real social change, not revenge. Marius' pure passion plays an important role in bringing Jean Valjean back to his lost humanity. In this passage, Jean Valjean first sees Marius as a human being, not as part of his revenge plan. The choice of the chief of the revolution. As the revolution reaches its peak, Marius finds himself in a dangerous situation at the barricade. Jean Valjean goes beyond his revenge and falls into conflict whether to save Marius or just look at him. This scene most clearly reveals Jean Valjean's inner conflict. He is shaken between himself, who cannot give up his path to revenge, and himself, who wants to show humanity. Eventually, Jean Valjean decides to save Marius. This is the moment he chooses humanity, beating his revenge. Even briefly, he rescues Marius from the barricade, prioritizing the lives of others, not his revenge plan. This choice is a trigger for real change within Jean Valjean. The line between revenge and redemption. Jean Valjean's choice makes him clearly aware of the line between revenge and salvation. After saving Marius, Jean Valjean realizes that he is not just a being who lives for revenge, but a being who can find greater meaning. He realizes how his revenge conflicts with the struggle for social justice, and sometimes blurs that line. This moment is an important turning point in Jean Valjean's realization that feelings other than revenge, love and forgiveness, can bring true redemption. He now goes beyond revenge and considers the impact of his actions on others more deeply. Deepening the theme and message. In Part 4, Jean Valjean is at odds between revenge and social justice, and his choice teaches him that humanity and forgiveness have greater power. This makes readers reflect on the destructive nature of revenge, and the power of love and forgiveness beyond. Through this process, Jean Valjean finds a way to true salvation. Jean Valjean's choice eventually deviates from the path of revenge and contributes to redefining the purpose of his life by adopting higher moral standards. His journey sends a message to readers that there is a value that is more important than revenge, making them explore human good, evil, and boundaries. Few dramas would be more intense than depicting Jean Valjean's conflict and choice over revenge. At the pinnacle of this tragedy, the final confrontation with Jabeur symbolizes the pinnacle of the war taking place within Jean Valjean. This chapter explores the complex human psychology of struggling between revenge and forgiveness, and provides deep consideration of what he really wants. Part 5. The last showdown with Jabeur. Jean Valjean finally falls into a trap. Jabeur is a symbol of law and order, and Jean Valjean's revenge was directed at. However, at this moment, Jean Valjean sees Jabeur's anguish. Jabeur experiences the collapse of his beliefs and feels the shaking of the absoluteness of the law he has believed in all his life. This is a moment when human beliefs in morality are tested. Not just revenge. Instead of arresting Jean Valjean, Jabeur decides to let him go. He conflicts at the boundary between his beliefs and the law, and is influenced by Jean Valjean's humanity and mercy. This act is a betrayal of Jabeur's beliefs, which eventually leads to his destruction. Jabeur suffers from questions about his life and beliefs and kills himself. This case awakens Jean Valjean to the senselessness and human anguish of revenge. Jean Valjean loses the meaning of revenge through Jabeur's death, the revenge he was seeking. He realizes that the moment he is held in his hand gives him no satisfaction. Rather, Jabeur's death brings a deep void to Jean Valjean. He realizes that Jabeur's death originated from his revenge and reflects deeply on whether the justice he pursued was true. In this confrontation, Jean Valjean realizes the destructive nature of revenge and the importance of human compassion. Revenge can give you instant pleasure, but all that remains is the emptiness and solitude. On the other hand, we experience that forgiveness is the only way to save humans. Jean Valjean witnesses the destructive power of revenge through Jabeur and prepares to move on to new feelings for Cosette and Marius. This part deals with a theme similar to the human moral dilemma that Victor Hugo emphasized in his original Les Miserables. In the original work, Jabeur loses the meaning of his life at Jean Valjean's mercy and kills himself. This moment symbolizes the conflict between human law and morality, and provides an opportunity for Jean Valjean to choose forgiveness instead of revenge. Jean Valjean's journey of revenge ends in a confrontation with Jabeur, but the realization he gains leads him on a new path. At the end of Revenge, he acknowledges the true power of forgiveness and love, which profoundly affects the rest of his life. This realization warns readers of the destructive power of revenge and sends a message that love and forgiveness bring true salvation. Jean Valjean's journey of revenge is now at its peak. He gets a chance to complete revenge for all that suppressed him. But ironically, in the process, he realizes he is becoming more and more like the people he hated. His relationship with Cosette has already been destroyed by his vengeance, and he is moving away from her. In the process of revenge, he is losing things he cherishes most, which increases his inner emptiness. Jean Valjean's final confrontation with Jabeur is the most important moment in his journey of revenge. Although Jabeur was a symbol of law and order, he was the object of Jean Valjean's vengeance. But the moment he tried to destroy him, Jean Valjean realized that he was no different from the Jabeur he hated so much. The fall of Jabeur meant the completion of revenge for Jean Valjean. But at that moment, he lost the meaning of revenge. Jean Valjean faces the destructive power of his revenge as he sees it collapse. Jean Valjean eventually loses everything and is left alone. His relationship with Cosette has deteriorated beyond reparation, and he realizes how his revenge has hurt his loved ones. Revenge brings him temporary pleasure, but the resulting solitude and emptiness erode his entire life. In a tragic ending, Jean Valjean dies and realizes that love and forgiveness, not revenge, bring true salvation. He leaves Cosette and Marius free, and he decides to spend the rest of his time in solitude. This ending leaves readers with a deep reflection on the destructive power of revenge and the healing power of forgiveness. Theme and message. Jean Valjean's story asks where true salvation comes from through the pitfalls of revenge and the resulting emptiness. Revenge can give a sense of temporary satisfaction, but in the end, it sends a message that forgiveness and love bring true liberation. The themes of social justice and individual choice are also revealed through Jean Valjean's revenge. He fights against the injustice of society, but loses things he cherished in the process. This allows readers to reflect on the ways in which justice is implemented and its consequences. Jean Valjean's tragic ending emphasizes the destructive power of revenge, leaving readers with a deep lingering image and reflection. The story makes the reader rethink the dilemma of revenge and forgiveness, and explores the boundaries between good and evil within humans. Jean Valjean eventually finds true freedom and peace by choosing love and forgiveness over his own vengeance.